let's focus in on the FAME 2 subsidy scheme. What exactly does it mean when it comes to EV makers as well as customers? My colleague Sumita Kareer is here to break that down for us. Sumita?
Difficult times ahead for some EV players as government has tightened scrutiny. Reportedly, the government has suspended FAME subsidies for at least two-wheeler companies on allegations of misappropriation of funds. Reportedly, the centre has also stepped up its probe against other EV manufacturers as well, at least 12 of them, including Greaves Electric Mobility, Kinetic Green Energy, etc. But what is this FAME scheme and what are the key allegations against some EV makers? While the 10,000 crore rupee FAME of faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicle scheme gives subsidy support to EV makers to meet the government's target for clean mobility, is now in its second phase as well. The scheme was redesigned in June 2021 and was extended until March 2024 after consultations with industry leaders. For what? Well, to incentivize demand for EVs via subsidies, to push for local innovation and grow India's manufacturing program. At present, support is being given to 2 million electric wheelers, 5 lakh electric three-wheelers, 55,000 electric four-wheelers and over 7,000 electric buses via subsidies so that India could reach its aim of 100% electrification by 2028. The subsidy scheme works in a simple fashion. Incentives are provided to buyers of electric vehicles through an upfront reduction in the purchase price of EVs, which were to be reimbursed later from the government. However, now the government's keen on rolling it back. You ask why? Well, because some brands have allegedly flouted the qualification criteria. According to the criteria, EV original equipment manufacturers or OEMs must demonstrate that at least 50% of the components of their vehicles are manufactured in India. These components should also be locally sourced, and which is where some violations have been observed with respect to the components factor primarily. The government is claiming that some auto parts like the motor controller, battery management system, etc., which was supposed to be locally produced, were in fact imported and subsidy was still claimed. The procurement of parts by some EV brands happened via a complex web of companies, according to some people in the knowledge who we've spoken to. Now, these people procured these components from foreign companies on behalf of these OEMs. Secondly, reportedly, some EV makers sold off chargers and software separately to comply with the 1.5 lakh price cap to avail of these government subsidies.
In fact, Sumita caught up with Sohinder Gill, who's the Director General SMEV, as well as the CEO of Kareer Electric. Listen in.
Thank you, Mr. Gill, for joining us here on ET Now. First things first, let me congratulate you for reporting 1 lakh units for sales for the second consecutive year. And you've also recently launched 3 new products. Take us through what are your capacity expansion plans for this year and what are the kind of partnerships that you're looking at?
Thank you. We have capacity with us of 500,000 today. Some part of it is under construction at Ludhiana, which will be over in 3 to 4 months' time. But we are home with 500,000 capacity, and which is sufficient for us for 1.5 to 2 years. Our plans, in according with the capacities, are Plan A and Plan B. If the government support continues, we would be doing a plan of around 250,000 next year. If the subsidy dries up, we have a plan of 150,000 next year. So this is a range of plan we have created for ourselves. We'll see how it goes. As far as expansion is concerned, we have the plans of the next plant, which is as of now a mega plant of 2 million in Rajasthan. But in accordance with any revision in the business plans, we will see how much do we construct out of it, whether 1 million immediately or 2 million straight away.
So like you stated, subsidies are going to have a major impact on how your production output this year is lined up. But since we're talking about subsidies, let me get your point of view. Let me get your side of the story on where you stand on this famed subsidy controversy, because the government has been claiming that there's been misappropriation of funds, that subsidies have been wrongfully claimed by some EV players. Since you also not just represent Hero Electric, but also represent the Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles, where do you stand on this issue?
See, first of all, let's go into the policy and intentions of the policy, FAME policy. So we believe that FAME is a path-breaking and pioneering policy. And that has really opened up the EV sector dramatically because of the tremendous potential to reach that 30% or 80% of two-wheelers being electric by 2030. But provided the irritants on the way or the flexibility of implementation is brought into the policy. So the policy is great, but the rigidity of policy as being sort of cast in stone has created issues here. Industry had a slow growth in FY23, you have seen, due to 15 months delay in subsidy for some of the players. So how can an OEM sustain for 15 months of subsidy, which is constituting around 30 to 40% of the cost of the vehicle, when they've already passed it on to the customers? So it has led to almost drying up of working capital for the major 80-90% of the volume that was being done by the leading OEMs at that point of time. This has hugely and negatively impacted OEMs in terms of operations. Some of them are sort of folding down, and some of them are thinking whether to continue in electric or not. In fact, startups have faced the highest brunt here, because they are already short of funds and they had a huge problem. Why it has simply, if you go into flexibility, there are solutions. For example, what industry is saying is just a factor of 2 years of COVID that has derailed the implementation of the policy. And if the COVID wouldn't have happened, most of the problems would have been resolved. Now, whether you factor the COVID when there was a blackout period, when the supply chain did not at all come into play, or not factor it, is now a question being talked with the government and authority. So if the reprieve is not there because the policy was cast in stone, and whether COVID or not COVID, we should have achieved the target, it's a very difficult situation. If you practically examine the implementation criteria and find a solution, it is a very easy solution of just giving 2 years reprieve, because everybody now from 1st of April or even before has got very good vendors, Indian vendors, very good technologies, good products, good certifications of AIS 156 battery standards, etc. Everybody has done all this. It's a one-time issue which is killing the industry. And I believe even the ministry is grappling with an idea of a resolution here. They are not on the other side of the table, but they're trying to grapple with a situation where this barrage of complaints of a sort of anonymous nature have come in such intensity that has sort of clouded the thinking of how to go about it, because it keeps on happening and there's some sort of a motive behind it. But perhaps we are on the same side of the table. And what I'm believing now is that lately the industry and the ministry both are trying to find a resolution for this. Today there are 16 players who are talking to the government, because all 16 are under the same cloud as the earlier 4 or 5 were. So it has become an industry issue now. So you kill all the players and start again. Okay, 5 years backtracking. If you want to get out of it quickly, it's a one-time reprieve or just a COVID factoring into the supply chain to start whatever was wanted to be done from 1st April 21 should be 1st of April 23. That's all. And everything is resolved.
Not being able to meet your targets due to COVID is one part of the story, but what the government essentially is claiming, and what I also mentioned in my earlier question, is that some of the EV players have wrongfully claimed subsidies, and this happened via a complex web of purchases. And not just this, the second charge has been that some of these EV players sold chargers separately to avail of these subsidies. Where do you stand on that? And secondly, what are the kind of conversations that you've been having with the government of late?
See, it started with those accusations by anonymous callers saying who did it and how much was done as far as local import is concerned. So if you retain at that level and try to find a solution at who did it and how much import or how much local was done, then there is no solution here. Because none of us could do 100% localization. Some could do 90%, some could do 30%, depending on availability of local suppliers. Like Exide was not making any of the batteries. Bosch was not making any of the motors. None of the top 10 suppliers of components were doing anything in electric in those times of 19 to 21. And on top of it, COVID derailed the process. So if you're trying to find an arithmetic solution, like I was telling earlier, that forget about why it could not be done, how it could have been done, just tell me how much you did, how much you did not do, then everybody is a culprit here, right? But more than that, every OEM has already passed on behalf of the government the subsidy to the customer here.
Right.
So that customer has already enjoyed the subsidy on behalf of the government. We are intermediary in between. The question is, can we take back the subsidy from the customer and give it back to the government? No. So it's not at all a question of delay, non-delays, or who did it, what did it. It is a scheme which did not have any localization when it started in 2015, 16, 17. There was in between a localization criteria being put in 2020 or 19, and there were practical constraints after that, due to which there was some delay in localization. Doesn't mean anything, because product which was certified continued to be sold as certified product. Quality remained the same. Only vendor A could not become vendor B, right? So from that point of view, and all the 30,000 rupees, 40,000 rupees per vehicles were passed on to the customer. So it is such an easy view. If it was a joint view to be taken, where is a misappropriation here? Where is a misrepresentation here? It's a question of government OEMs passing on behalf of government money to the customer. If you want it back, let us take it back from the customers and give it back to the government.
Fair point, sir. I completely take your point. But what you're essentially stating is that it's an interpretation of the policy issue. It's a communication issue. We sincerely hope that EV players like yourselves are able to arrive at some solution and end the discord as it is right now. But let me also ask you, what are your next steps going to be? Are you planning to legally challenge this move to sort of resolve this deadlock?
Yeah, I think first is there was some sort of a deadlock earlier, but I think we are on the path of resolution. I also feel the new executives in the ministries are much more proactive in trying to find a solution. The problem was with the earlier set of people who were sort of creating a brick wall between industry and the ministry. But now we are finding very frequent discussions happening, proactively discussion happening, trying to find a common path. So that's a good thing. There is absolutely no way that we should end up doing litigations here. That is from association we have been strongly advocating, because litigation don't answer anything except winning the case. But it may take 1 year and 2 years, and by the time the industry doesn't have any money to fight for it. So litigation is not the answer here. Resolution is an answer here. I'm saying not even interpretation of the policy. I would say straight away, factoring the practical difficulties while implementing the policy is the topic being discussed here. Any policy in India, there is always a correction midway. There is always an amendment midway, considering what happened during the implementation. The same is expected here, and the same is being sought here. The same is being discussed here. So if we factor that there was hardly any supply chain initially when the volumes were very low, and whatever was there ran into COVID period, the answer is there for everybody. And by that time, 1,600 crores has been passed on to the customers by the OEMs on behalf of the government. Just take care of those 1,600 crores and here on put every possible stringent measure to see that now onwards, at least, whatever your targets are for localization, whatever your targets for this are, they are implemented properly. So the policy is great. The implementation has fallen into the trap of being a rigidity of policy rather than flexibility of a policy. So I'm a very strong believer and very optimistic about a solution in the next 4 or 5 weeks, primarily because understand when 16 OEMs you put together their volumes, there are 98% of the volume.
Right.
If 98% people have done something, it can't be wrong. Right. And all of them are individually doing it, not collectively doing it. And they tried their best to do something good for the country, good for the customer. There's nothing like inferior products being sold here, nothing like that. So there is no question of taking such a rigid view. I'm very sure that after this problem has become an industry-wide problem of everybody into the fix, there has to be some solution within the ministry or within the country from whosoever is interested to take electric mobility to a greater height.
And on that note, then, it's a wrap on this leg of the show. Do remember to connect with us on SEC at etnow.tv. Thanks so much for watching. Catch you same time tomorrow.